How are you all doing? It's great to see you all here. Before we start, can you just make sure to turn off your mobile phones so we don't have any distractions? That'd be great. Thank you. So have you ever said to yourself something along the lines of, I don't have a technical bone in my body. I'm just not clever enough. Or I just don't work that way. These might be some of the negative thoughts that we have on a regular basis, but are there any truth to these thoughts? Are we really hardwired to think a certain way? Or can creative individuals develop technical skills? So I'm Ruthie, and I'm the lead character rigger at TT Games. And I'm here today to tell you how you can develop technical skills and how that in turn is going to increase your creativity. 15 years ago, I was that person. I thought that I wasn't able to think technically, that I wasn't clever enough. And now I earn a living from my technical knowledge. So to give you a quick overview of what we'll be covering today, we'll be starting with an introduction where I'll be going more in depth into my background and how I overcame the challenges to develop technical skills. And then we'll be looking at the science behind how creative brains work. Before moving on to looking at developing technical skills, so looking at what skills you should develop, why you should develop them, and how you can develop them. And then we'll be looking at the future. So looking at, what does our current trajectory mean for technical and creative knowledge? And then we'll be moving into close. And I have allocated some time at the end for questions. So before I tell you more about me, I want to know a bit about all of you. So, how technical would you say you are? Could we get a raise of hands of anyone that's not technical? You'd say you're not technical. Anyone in here? There's a few of you. Yeah, cool. Anyone say they're fairly technical? You've got a couple of, yeah, okay. So quite a lot of you. Yeah. How about anyone very technical in here? Oh, wow. Okay, so we've got quite a few. That's cool. How about anyone extremely technical? Wow. Wow. Oh my goodness. You must I don't know, think in binary or something. No, that's awesome. It's great to have you all here. So this talk is aimed more at those with less technical knowledge. But for all of you that are extremely technical or very technical, there is a lot that you can actually take out of this talk as well. So the other question was, what is your employment status? So is anyone in here employed currently in the games industry? Okay, so that's pretty much 100%. Anyone employed in other industries or contractors or, yeah, okay, so a few of you as well. Any students in here? Yeah, okay, there's a few students. Anyone actively seeking opportunities? That might include you students as well. Yeah, quite a few of you. So loads of you actively seeking opportunities. You're surrounded by loads of games folks. They're going to be great contacts for you. So just, perhaps after this talk, just speak to the person next to you. So this is me, aged 2 or 3 or something, playing my piano. And I was always really creative growing up, always very imaginative. And school reports actually raised concerns about me kind of daydreaming, not paying attention in class. And I actually struggled quite a lot academically during school. And years later, I found out that I'm dyslexic. And so that was probably partially to blame. But I'd actually developed really good coping mechanisms that helped me get through secondary school. So I was kind of doing okay. And so I kind of blended into the background a little bit. But everything changed for me when I did Media BTech. And I had 2 teachers that were just so inspiring. They were incredibly passionate about their subject. And I felt like they really believed in me. And I was like, I'm not stupid. I'm actually quite capable. And that completely changed my life, really. And I actually decided, okay, I'm going to go to uni and I'm going to study media studies. And I didn't do that. I actually, when I was looking around at unis, I realized I was more interested in animation, even though I'd never done any animation before. And so I ended up going to Teesside University and studying computer animation and visual effects. And I'd heard at uni that riggers are like gold dust in the industry. So going into rigging is like, you know, the best place that you can go into because there are so many jobs out there. And so I was like, well, better do that then. So I decided that I was going to develop technical skills in rigging. And I found it really hard. So, you know, being a very creative person, first time I opened Maya, for example, I was like, oh my goodness, I can't do that. And I'd kind of thought that I wasn't going to be able to do it, but I did. So how did I do that? Well, I got comfortable with being uncomfortable. So it's okay to be afraid. We're all afraid at some point in our life. You know, it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to get stuff wrong. So I just kept going to, you know, rigging classes. I kept following online tutorials. And eventually, when I was persevering, you know, in developing these skills and persevering through all of these different classes, eventually I got there in the end and I was able to develop those skills. Now, looking back on that time, the one thing I would say about that was I had this fake it till you make it approach. So what I was doing was I wasn't actually being honest with people around me that I didn't understand what on earth was going on. So quite often I'd be in, you know, the Python class and I'd be like, I don't get what they're talking about. But, you know, I just like pretend, yeah, yes, I know everything there is to know about everything. And actually looking back on that, if I had been honest and open with the people around me that I'd been struggling, then I would have got extra support and that would have helped me develop those skills much, much sooner. So, yeah, then I went into the industry and I've worked on various projects and in various companies. Probably the most well-known project is Avengers Endgame. And I found that actually the more kind of I progressed in the industry, the more technical I became. So we're going to look at some sciencey stuff now. So we're going to look at how our brains actually work. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the idea of people being left-brained or right-brained. And left-brained people are very logical and right-brained people are very creative. So we're going to do a little test now to see whether each of you are left-brained or right-brained. So this is a spinning ballerina. Can you raise your hand if you see them pointing out their right leg? Okay, so a lot of you. How about anyone see her pointing her left leg out? Okay, so we're about 50-50. How about, does anyone see her changing different directions? Oh, wow, quite a few of you. So those of you that saw her sticking her right leg out, you're right-brained, so highly creative. And those of you that saw her sticking her left leg out, you're highly logical using your left brain. Those of you that saw her changing directions, you actually are using your entire brain. So, you know, watch out for you guys, like, yeah, so that's actually all complete gibberish. The reality is, it's an optical illusion. So you can actually train yourself to see her spinning in both ways if you want. But where did this idea come from? There's loads of tests out there where you can find out what brain you're using. Where did this theory come from? So it came from the 1960s, where there's this dude called Roger Sperry, and he did a bunch of experiments with split-brained patients. And these are people who've had the part of their brain that communicates between both sides. They've had that part severed. So what that means is you've got both sides of the brain can work independently and simultaneously. And so he used that in order to be able to tell what side of the brain is responsible for what processes. And he concluded this. So that the left brain was responsible for maths, facts, and generally very logical. And the right brain responsible for rhythm, intuition, and generally very artistic. Now, the only problem with looking at it this way is that it isn't always entirely one-sided or the other. So in 2006, Funnell did an experiment with one split-brain patient, and he did a bunch of maths, basically, very simple maths with this patient, and he found that the left side of the brain was 95% accurate in all of those areas. The right side of the brain was at fault for everything except for addition, for which they were 58% accurate. So that's really unusual. I mean, there's obviously a clearly very heavy weighting in these areas, and this does give us an idea, but it's not entirely one or the other necessarily. So we know that the left side of the brain is very logical, right side's very artistic. But do we have a dominant side? Do we really use one more than the other? Now, in 2013, the University of Utah looked at this. So they did 1,000 MRI scans of people aged between 7 and 29. And what they found was that there was no evidence for people having a dominant side. So everyone was able to use their entire brain equally. So we know this so generally people access their brain, right? What about highly creative people? Is there actually any difference between how highly creative people think? So there was one research paper that looked specifically at creative people. And what they found was they compared 68 different brain regions of the brain, and they looked at the white matter connections between each of these regions. So the white matter connections are the parts that communicate between each region. And what they found was that there was no kind of difference between each hemisphere. So each side of the brain, there was no difference. But when they did a creativity score with each of these people, and when they took the top 15 percentile in that creativity score and the bottom 15 percentile, and they compared the two, they actually found that highly creative people have more white matter connections, significantly more white matter connections between the right brain and the left brain. So what that tells us is highly creative people are actually jumping between both brains quite a lot. So can we change our brains? Is it possible for us to become even more creative? The answer is yes. So you may have heard of neuroplasticity, and this is the brain's ability to change and adapt. And this is something that we previously thought was only possible in children, right? So obviously when kids are young, their brain is developing, for the first time, and they can, do whatever they want with their brain. It's going to, develop new neural pathways all the time. And that is true. But recently, they've realized that actually this happens at any age. So anyone can change and adapt their brain. They can train their brain. So you can actually train your brain to be more creative. Now, we won't be able to ever fully understand the brain. It really is the most complex thing in the known universe. So all of this scientific research is awesome, but ultimately, we're not going to know everything. So what? Why should you care? There's all of this sciencey stuff, it's kind of cool, but why should you care? Well, you should care because it means that you are capable of technical thinking. So if any of you have those negative thoughts that we were talking about at the beginning, they're complete rubbish. The only limitations that you actually have are the limitations that you are putting on yourself, right? So you can learn technical skills. You have that ability. So we've done the sciencey bit now. So you can all breathe a sigh of relief and perhaps take a sip of water, have a little breather, and then we'll be moving on to look at developing technical skills. So what skills should you develop? Well, obviously, this is going to depend on who you are as a person, what your job is. But I'm going to give you a tool that you can use to identify the skills that you should develop. So the first thing to do is to write a list of hard and soft skills. So these are the skills that you already have. And you can give them a rating of 1 to 10 as to, how advanced you think you are in that area. So hard skills are skills like that are tangible, generally as a result of education, training. And so they're skills like Python or knitting. I love to knit, so that's why I threw that in there. And soft skills are more about your personality, who you are, what your attitude is. So stuff like collaboration and creativity. So once you've got that, you then want to look at job descriptions. So if you're currently in employment, maybe use your current job description, compare your skills against that, see if there are any gaps. Are you thinking of progressing? Are you thinking of changing roles? If you are, then include those job descriptions as well. So see, are there any gaps? Is there anything here that I'm not meeting that criteria? The other thing to look at is your past feedback. So we should all have loads of past feedback. And if you don't, you've probably got the wrong people around you because we should be getting feedback on a regular basis. So look through that. Is there anything in particular that jumps out at you that you could develop further? You shouldn't just take your past feedback. The main thing to do is to get new feedback because obviously past feedback's great, but it's not necessarily going to match up to where you're at now, right? So what this is going to do as well is it's going to see where you are in terms of your development kind of curve. Have you progressed already in a certain area? And then the last thing to do is to prioritize. So look at those areas that you've identified, those skills that you could develop, and give them a priority level. Work out what ones you want to focus on first. Okay, so I've told you what skills you can develop or how you can identify the skills to develop. But why? Why should you bother? Well, in case you haven't worked it out by the title of the talk, it's going to increase your creativity. So If you Google how to become more creative, one of the top recommendations is to learn a new skill in a different area. Now, I'm no scientist, but to me, that makes a lot of sense when we're thinking about that scientific research we were talking about before, in that, creative brains have a lot of that jumping around, because you're developing a new skill, perhaps you're creating new neural pathways. So not only is it inherently going to increase your creativity, but it also removes your past limitations. If you are creative and technical, you're unstoppable. So the previous limitations that you had with software, you don't have anymore. You could create an add-on, for that piece of software. If you learn Python, for example, create an add-on, make it do what you want it to. There are 3 more areas that I think, is beneficial for. One of them is efficiency. So I'm sure all of you have some task that you do in your job that's really repetitive and is really boring, and you have to do it so much. And so if you learn Python, you can actually create a little script that does it at the click of a button. Yeah. So it's going to help in terms of your efficiency. And it means that you're going to better be able to debug, so if you've got something, like an error or whatever, hopefully you'll be able to have the skills you need in order to debug that issue, and you can get back to work a lot quicker. It's going to help with collaboration as well. Because if you're an artist and, you work with a lot of tech people, it's kind of difficult to explain your problems sometimes. It's kind of difficult to understand their workflows. Well, if you learn technical skills, you perhaps learn their workflows, then you're going to be better able to communicate and work together with them. So the last thing, and I think this is probably the big hitter, is employability. So Python always looks good on your CV. I mean, come on. Everyone loves to see Python. But not only that, but there's also a big gap when it comes to finding people that have a really good balance of creative and technical skills. So games is like slap bang in the middle of that, right? So there are so many games roles out there that require both creative and technical skills. And we're not filling all of them. We're not filling all of those positions. So having a really good balance of creative and technical skills is really going to help with your employability. So how can you develop these technical skills? So again, this is going to depend on what skill you're focusing on. But for me, the best way is to do a skill exchange. So if you don't know what a skill exchange is, it's where you find someone else to mentor you in a skill, and you mentor them in another skill. So what you're doing there is you're going to have someone alongside you to help you in that area. Every time that you reach a hurdle, they're going to be there. They're going to be able to help you. They're going to be able to answer any questions you have. And they will take the time to sit with you and explain, the theory behind everything. They'll be able to explain in depth what's going on. The other thing is games jams. So the great thing about game jams is that you're kind of thrown into the deep end, right? You've got a small team and you're working on something generally quite big that's got a lot of areas. So you're kind of forced to wear multiple hats. So it's really great in order to sort of force you to develop technical skills. But obviously the time is limited, and that's why I think exchanging skills is slightly better. Online courses is the last one. Now, this is the one that everyone beelines to, right? I'm sure you can all relate with that. And online courses are brilliant. There are so many great online courses out there, but they're not going to be there for you when you reach a hurdle. They're not going to be able to answer your questions. So I recommend having an accountability partner or someone that is there to be able to support you, to be there for any hurdles you do come across and to answer any of your questions. The other thing is you might find that you actually have some habits that are preventing you from developing further. So this could be something like perhaps every time you get an issue with your computer, you ask the person next to you instead of looking into it yourself. Or perhaps you have a workaround for a problem and you're not actually getting to the root cause of that issue. So the habit loop cycle is used a bunch in health and fitness, and we can actually use it for anything. So we can actually change our habits, and this ties into the neuroplasticity thing that we were talking about earlier. Like, your brain can change. You can change your habits if you want to. So what we do is we change the trigger, we change the action, we change the reward. If you want to hear more about this, then please do speak to me afterwards, because I'm more than happy to go into depth with it, but we don't have time to cover it today. So we're now moving on to look at the future. What does our current trajectory mean when it comes to developing technical skills? What does it mean between our relationship between technical and creative knowledge? Well, the first thing, which we've already started to see, is node-based software. I think this is going to expand even further than it already has. And I think we're going to see loads of programs with node-based functionality. And the powerful thing about nodes is that artists can do a heck of a lot more than they used to be able to. So rather than requiring artists to go to programmers to ask to implement things, they can actually do it themselves. And I think as a result, we're going to see more roles that require that creative, technical balance. But I don't necessarily see this carrying through in education. So the one thing about education is it pushes us to specialize. And there are some really good reasons for that. I'm not knocking the education system. There's a very good reason for why it is the way it is. But ultimately, the choices that you have at uni level are a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science. You don't have something in between that looks at both, right? And I think generally what we find is that people specialize to be either very artistic, very technical. And we're losing out on that kind of that middle ground, that highly creative area of having a really good balance of technical and artistic skills. So I think as a result, we're going to continue to see it being difficult to recruit people for those roles, unless something changes, which I hope it does. And the last thing is, I've seen a few articles recently that talk about, you must focus on developing artistic skills and artistic skills alone because the robot's going to take over, and I have an issue with that on multiple levels. So I think the first thing is, I don't think it recognizes actually where we are when it comes to machine learning, artificial intelligence. Also, we looked at this before, like you have to have some technical knowledge in order to reach that really highly creative group. So we're actually going to lose out on reaching that area if you're just focusing on developing artistic skills. You're going to miss out on that. So that's it from me, really. So I'll be going through a little summary of what we've covered today. So you can be technical. So if you take anything away from this talk, I hope is that you can develop the skills you need. And for those of you that were, extremely technical, highly technical folks, if you develop artistic skills, then you're going to be reaching that top highly creative area too. Evaluate your skill set. So look at what your current skills are. Look at what skills, are required in those job descriptions, and point out, what are the areas that you should develop. Technical skills have many benefits. So, not only is it going to increase your creativity, but it's going to help with collaboration, employability. Skill exchange is the best way to develop a technical skill, or just a new skill in general. And perseverance is key. So by persevering, you will get there in the end. And don't work in isolation. So when we were talking about online courses, make sure you have that accountability partner, that you have someone there to help you. So that's it from me today. Thanks everyone for listening. Thank you. So I obviously have my contact details on the screen. Please do feel free to drop me an email if you have any questions about anything. I love speaking to people, meeting new friends and stuff. So, and if you want to contact TT specifically about any TT projects or anything, then please do contact us on our website, because we love hearing from all of you. And everything that gets sent through does get read. So obviously we get a lot of stuff through. We can't always reply to every single thing. And also we're hiring. So if you want to chat to me afterwards, we're always looking out for new talent. So that's great. So any questions? No questions. Cool. Well, I've got some additional content that we can actually go through. So these are my top tips, right? Everyone gets imposter syndrome. So it took for me to sort of get into Weta for me to realize, okay, everyone in the industry really doesn't know what they're doing. And it's we're all just trying to make our way in the world, and we don't know everything. No one's an expert on everything, in the world. And the other thing, persevere. So keep going. If you're really struggling in a certain area, just keep at it. Your brain does have the ability to develop. So keep going. And also it's good to have new hobbies. So given that we're in Brighton, maybe you want to take some photos of some seagulls and try this out for yourself. But really, hobbies are great. They do give our brains the ability to just process what's going on. And, I often find that when I've got a particularly difficult problem at work, that actually I work out a solution to it when I'm not at work. 90% of the time, I'm I don't know, walking around the National Trust property or something. I'm oh yeah, I can use that, yeah. Let's see, what else what else can we cover? Yeah, so we can go more in depth into the habit loop. So if you want to change your habits, what you can do is you can make your, if you want to set new good habits, you can make your trigger really obvious. So let's say you're thinking, actually, I want to add breaks into my day. I don't take enough breaks. I'm going to add more breaks in. Well, you could make it so that you have a reminder, pops up on your screen, take a break. So that's quite an obvious trigger. And you want the action to be attractive and easy. So perhaps you have a little kind of space that you go to in your breaks that has, some things that you like there. It's a really nice environment. You've got a nice candle that smells really nice. Like, I like nice smelling candles. And so you're going to want to go there for your break, right? And then you make the reward really satisfying. So obviously in this situation, you should be satisfied after just having that break because you should feel replenished and renewed. But maybe you grab your favorite drink on the way back to your desk. So if you want to change an existing habit and get rid of it, basically, then you want to make that trigger invisible, if possible. Now, we can't always do this to everything. So, like, for example, if you get an error on your computer, you can't, not get the error. You're going to get the error regardless, right? But let's say you get an error on your computer and you ask the person next to you to help. Right, so you can actually change the action to be unattractive and difficult by asking that person not to help you. So basically make sure that they are holding you accountable. So say, could you just not help me next time because I'm trying to actually develop, skills in this area. I'm trying to become more technical. And then hopefully that person won't help you. And you've made that action unattractive and difficult. And the reward is naturally going to be less satisfying because you know that you've caved. If they help you, you're going to be like, oh, darn it, I caved. Python, cool. So when I was first writing this talk, I actually practiced it and it was an hour and a half long. So I cut out loads of stuff. And obviously on the day, I'm way early. So this is something that we can actually cover. So I think it's really, really easy to develop. Well, I say easy. It's the easiest, one of the easiest coding languages that you can learn is Python. There's a few out there that are quite easy to learn. So, and I really believe that anyone can learn Python. So there are a couple of resources. One of them, this is Code Academy, which again, it's an online course, so it's not the ideal, but I think this is as good as you can get really, because you can literally type the code, check, is it right? Have I done it correctly? And it will raise errors if you've done stuff wrong, and it will kind of help you as much as it can, given that it's not a person. So it's really good. And I also recently got my team on this course, which is pretty good. And it covers all of the kind of basics, the fundamentals of Python. But again, I mean, it's just not going to be as good as getting a person to help you. Okay, cool. So I was going to suggest a few skills that you can develop. So one of them obviously is Python, which we've just covered. The other thing is Unreal Blueprints. So this is a really good way of sort of getting familiar with how coding languages kind of work without actually coding. So yeah, look at blueprints. They're really useful. And the other thing is like Excel. People don't realize actually, like, you can do a lot in Excel. Like, it is actually kind of amazing. And the great thing about like learning Excel more is it's not just going to be useful in your work life, but you can actually find it quite useful in your personal life. At least I have. Like, it helps so much when you're like looking at finances and all of that kind of stuff. So cool. And yeah, I already covered Python. Yes, goals. So when you're looking at, you've picked your skill that you want to develop, it's really good to set yourself a goal, because you have a really clear, way in order to develop that skill. You've got a really clear sort of aim for you to get to. And if you set milestones for that goal, you set out steps on how to achieve it, it's just going to line you up for success. So, well, given that we've only got a few minutes left, questions? Yes. Hi. Oh, thank you.
I was wondering, throughout your research, because obviously you put a lot into it.
Yeah.
Oh wow, thanks. Hi. That's fun. So throughout your research, have you come across anything that applies to perhaps neurodivergent people?
Yeah, so no, basically.
Okay.
This was something that I was considering looking into more, like obviously being dyslexic. It was something I was interested in. I think that the difficulty is with a lot of these kind of scientific research papers, it needs like a really large number of people like contributing to it. And I didn't find that much there in terms of like, neurodivergent folks. One thing that I've identified is that within my team, within rigging in particular, is that we are generally more neurodiverse. There's less neurotypical folks in those areas, which makes me kind of think that neurodiverse peeps are probably better at having that kind of creative, technical skill. But yeah, I don't have any kind of scientific proof to that. That's just my gut feeling, Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure.
Thank you. Hello. So for context, I'm actually an animation programmer, so I'm in a technical role, but I work very closely with our animators and riggers day to day.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So my question was, do you just have any sort of general advice on how people in technical roles can open up that line of communication with the more creative individuals to kind of, I guess, facilitate skill sharing, like within the context of your workplace and making that a bit more accessible?
Yeah, I think just speak to them. Like, to be honest, I think, like, most people are wanting to get better at things, right? We're all wanting to get more skills. We're all wanting to develop. So just like offering that up to people, like perhaps you could suggest to like your company, could we do a mentorship program or something like that, to actually open a platform for people to be able to sort of access that without being like, oh my gosh, I've got to go and speak to someone and I'm too scared to. Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries. Yeah.
Hi there.
Hello.
Thanks for the talk. I've got a question about your Python skills, and just wondered if you had some examples of how you have used your programming knowledge within your day-to-day job of being an animator and rigger.
Yeah, so at the moment, we're actually developing a rigging API. And this is something to basically make all of our rigs really consistent and make it so that we can create rigs a lot quicker. So that is like a the main focus for us at the moment. But to be honest, a lot of rigging involves Python. And I mean, one of the things that you get in the industry a lot is there's a lot of focus on like C++, C#. But the reason why within rigging, in particular within our company, we've decided to stick with Python is because we feel that it's a lot more open to others to develop. You know, it's easier for people to learn. So, you know, in particular, we hire a lot of juniors because there aren't that many riggers about, right? So it's kind of important for us to use Python specifically. But yeah, I use it all the time myself.
Do you find it's helpful to have a bit of mathematical knowledge to go with that? Or?
Definitely. Yeah. So matrix maths in particular, really, really useful. Yeah. So that's a part of like the API that we're developing. It's all using matrices basically. So yeah, maths is definitely useful. Yeah.
Yeah. Cheers.
Thanks. Cool. Anything else? Any other? No more questions? Well, we've got 1 minute to go, so we could just finish early, which I wasn't expecting to say, but that's great. I obviously just ran through it a lot quicker. Cool. So thanks, everyone. See you later.